Hello, everybody. It's Tony here from Locks to Who. My apologies for the lack of updates. I'm sort of on and off unwell at the moment. I don't think the heat is helping. But what I thought I'd do is I'd put up a video that is basically a suggested list of classic Doctor Who stories to watch just to get you started. Um, I've put. I'm going to put them in order of Doctor and broadcast. Well, not exactly in order, but I'm going to start with the first Doctor and move up to Paul McGann. Um, you don't have to watch them in that order. And just to cover the basics, I'm making this video for somebody that probably knows very little about classic Doctor Who. If you do know and you agree or disagree with my suggestions, then you are more than welcome to put your comments down below. Classic Doctor Who stories are usually consists of multiple 25-minute episodes. I've got a script here, by the way, which is why you'll see me keep looking. Well, not script, a guide and notes. Consists of multiple 25-minute episodes. There's a blip in the Colin Baker era where they go to 45-minute episodes, with one earlier exception of Resurrection of the Daleks, which was broadcast, but which is a Pete Davison story, which was broadcast in two 45-minute episodes. And they vary from 2 to 12 episodes in length. What I have tried to do is I've tried to pick only four-part episodes, four-part stories, four-episode stories, I'll mention some exceptions, because I think that's a good. If you're starting out and watching classic Doctor Who, that's probably the best sort of way to dip in, particularly with the 60 stories, which are much slow, much more theatrical and much slower than modern Doctor Who is. So let's start with the William Hartnell era. So my recommendations are the Romans, the Time Meddler, and the War Machines. I would say the War Machines is the nearest thing to a modern Doctor Who story from the Hartnell era. The Time Meddler is probably next. The Romans is a historical, out and out historical, so how your tolerance for that may vary, but it's funny, and it features Barbara and Ian and Vicky as companions, who are, I think, among my favourite TARDIS teams of all time. Now, if you enjoy those, then I would go back to watch the first 13 episodes, starting with An Unearthly Child, which I have reviewed now. So you can make of that what you will. The Daleks is long at 7 episodes. There is a cut down version in colour that the BBC made recently, which I hate, but it might work for you as somebody that's not you. I think it's badly edited, and I think the music is overwhelmingly overwhelms it. But I'm probably in the minority there, and I can see the purpose of doing that. And if you still like, and after that you still like William Hartnell, then anything that still exists is your oyster. I would hold off watching The Web Planet for a bit. I love that story, but it is there's a lot of weird shit there to overlook. Now, next, the Patrick Troughton era. There's two problems for the Patrick Troughton era for a new Doctor Who fan. There aren't many four-part stories, and a lot of it is missing because the BBC wiped film to reuse it. Now, I think there's only 7 Troughton stories that exist in full still, out of 21. But there are now animated versions of a number of them. So I've picked my first 3 picks would be the Tomb of the Cybermen, the Enemy of the World, which is 6 episodes, and the Mind Robber, which is 5 episodes, but they're very short. The Tomb of the Cybermen is often sort of seen as the classic Troughton story. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's been a while since I watched it, but it's a great 4-part story, and Patrick Troughton is brilliant in it. If you like those, then a bigger challenge would be The Invasion, 8 episodes, 2 of which are animated. The Invasion is my favourite Troughton story. It features the first appearance of Unit. So yeah, that and then the War Games at 10 episodes, which is Troughton's last story, exists in full. Again, the BBC have done a colour cut down version, which I haven't watched because I disliked the Daleks version so much that I didn't want to touch it with a barge pole. But again, if it's probably a good way for a new fan to be introduced to the story. It's actually brilliant. Even 10 episodes, it doesn't drag. So yeah, that's my recommendation. And if you want to dip into an animation, my recommendation is the Macra Terror. Even though that's a very odd story, it's sort of like it's almost like the Doctor Who does the Prisoner. There is no such thing as the Macra, by the way. That's a very obscure, well, not obscure, but that's a classic Doctor Who fan in joke. Then moving on to Jon Pertwee, it's in colour, so that's a step, a helpful step. My picks are Spearhead from Space, The Curse of Peladon, The Three Doctors, and Carnival of Monsters. Spearhead from Space, I would pick. It's the first Jon Pertwee story, but it's if you've watched Rose and you like Rose, Spearhead from Space is basically Rose, but with more focus on the companion and less focus and then no mention of Unit. Those are my picks as four parters. There's lots of other Pertwee that I would recommend. For me, Jon Pertwee is one of the two Doctors where I often never really feel like I'm in the mood to watch a Jon Pertwee story, but when I do, I normally always enjoy them. Then there's Tom Baker. Now, I'm slightly biased here because I love Tom Baker. I could pick loads. My recommended start points would be The Ark in Space, Terror of the Zygons, Robots of Death, Horror of Fang Rock, particularly around Halloween because that's a great horror story, and City of Death from season 17. Now, I love season 17. I would recommend it all to you, but a lot of people would not because it's possibly Doctor Who at its most cheap and cheerful. But I love it. See, if you like those, you can watch season 16, which is The Key to Time, because that's one of the rare classic Who Doctor Who seasons that has a whole arc for the whole season, and it's actually very good as well, in my opinion. Although the Armageddon factor isn't brilliant, but it's still entertaining. But to me, most Tom Baker is fun to watch. Some people, my friend Aya, will disagree with me. Next, Peter Davison. I've picked here Kinder, Snake Dance, The Five Doctors, which is a 90-minute special, and The Caves of Androzani, which is Peter Davison's last story. Kinder and Snake Dance are linked. They're very odd. They're probably not necessarily the ones that other people might recommend, because they're slightly weird and strange, to the extent that there was a fan rumour for years that Kate Bush had written them, or at least written Kinder. So yeah, those are my picks. Then Colin Baker. Poor old Colin Baker doesn't have a very long era. And one whole season is The Trial of a Time Lord, which is four stories in one story. So my recommendations, and these are all 45-minute episodes, are Mark of the Rani, Vengeance on Varos, and Revelation of the Daleks. If you like those, then Trial of a Time Lord is yours to watch, by which point you've watched most of the Colin Baker era, so you may as well watch the whole thing. Then there's Sylvester McCoy. Again, it's a short era, which is a shame. My picks for that are Remembrance of the Daleks, The Happiness Patrol, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, and The Curse of Fenric. Now, the only one on that I think people might have real issues with is The Happiness Patrol, which I don't know if divisive is the right word, but the people that love it really love it, and the people that don't like it really don't like it. And then finally, Paul McGann. For TV purposes, you've only got the TV movie. This is not the time and the place for me to talk about Big Finish, where Paul McGann has done loads of excellent stuff. And I would recommend, if you like, and all the classic Doctors, or their companions have done Big Finish stuff. Which is full cast audio dramas, featuring classic Doctors. I would recommend at some point, if you start to like classic Doctor Who, that you dip into Big Finish. And that's my recommendations. I hope that will be useful to somebody that's never watched classic Doctor Who. Um, it is my choices. So some people, as I said, some people might not agree with them, um, and I'm happy to see sort of comments or alternative lists in the comments. Um, yeah, that's it. And I've managed to keep this at under 15 minutes, which is some kind of miracle. So there you go. I will have my next review, which is the Keys of Marinus, up over the weekend at some point. I can't promise anything because as I said, sometimes I feel great and sometimes I feel terrible. And I don't want to dwell on that. So let's move on. Like, comment, and subscribe, as the saying goes. Bye bye.